Proctor Vex adjusted the tri-lenses of his ocular implants and scanned the assembled audience with an air of profound intellectual disappointment. This was, to be fair, his default setting. Vex was a Xylosian, a species that looked like an origami praying mantis folded from parchment paper, and they considered anything less than pure, crystalline logic to be a form of cognitive sludge. His current lecture, a mandatory cross-species integration seminar titled Biomechanical Inefficiencies of Younger Races, was practically a festival of said sludge. He was currently on slide 47, depicting a bipedal hominid. "Observe," he chirped, his voice a series of precise, dry clicks that the universal translator rendered as a bored Oxford Don. "The Homo sapiens. A fascinating case study in suboptimal design. They possess a class 4 neural network, capable of rudimentary poetry and complex tax evasion, yet it is housed in a chassis that can only be described as a biological compromise." In the back row, Alex Chen tried very hard to look like a chair. He was a human, a logistics specialist assigned to Research Station Epsilon, and his main job was to make sure the right crates of nutrient paste and experimental xenoflora went to the right labs. Mandatory seminars were the space station equivalent of a dental cleaning, unpleasant, necessary, and you just had to get through it. Their primary method of locomotion, Vex continued, tapping a spindly appendage on his console to highlight the human's legs, is a jarring, inefficient gait that puts enormous stress on load-bearing joints. Their energy conversion is abysmal. For burst activity, they are outclassed by virtually any species with dedicated fast-twitch muscle fibers, such as the Grolak. Across the aisle, a mountain of muscle and chitin-named cord puffed out his chest. Grolaks were built for the pounce. They could punch through a bulkhead and then nap for 18 hours. Cord gave Alex a look that was half pity, half smug superiority. Alex gave him a non-committal shrug that meant, "Yeah, fair enough." "But," Vex said, leaning forward for what he considered a devastating intellectual blow, "it is their supposed endurance that is the most laughable claim. Proponents of human physiological exceptionalism often cite a primitive hunting strategy known as persistence hunting, the very concept." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang. "Is an exercise in absurdity." The translator struggled for a moment, then settled on a tone of deep, academic mockery. "The strategy, if one can call it that, involves chasing prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Not outsmarting it. Not overpowering it. Simply jogging after it. For hours. Or even days. It is the tactical equivalent of trying to erode a mountain by staring at it. A monumental waste of metabolic resources. Inefficient. Primitive. Frankly, a bit embarrassing." Several of the non-human attendees tittered. Alex just sighed. He'd gone for a 5K run on the station's gravity track that morning. It had been nice. He'd listened to a podcast. Now his entire evolutionary history was being roasted by a creature who probably considered climbing a flight of stairs to be a Herculean effort. Any species with a modicum of sense, Vex concluded, dismissing the slide with a flick of his claw, develop sufficient energy burst mechanics. You strike, you succeed or fail, you rest and recalculate. You do not simply keep going. It is the pinnacle of biological foolishness. A brute force solution where no force exists to begin with. A small, furry creature in the front row, an administrative drone named Fit from a species that communicated stress by vibrating, began to oscillate gently. "So, Proctor, are you suggesting human stamina is a myth?" Phipp's voice was a high-pitched series of panicked squeaks. "Not a myth," Vex corrected, with the patience of a god explaining physics to a mollusk. "Just a profound misapplication of energy. It is a biological party trick, not a viable strategy for any advanced organism. Now, if you will turn your attention to slide 48, we will discuss the baffling redundancy of the Tiblonian digestive tract." Alex was about to tune out completely and start mentally organizing shipping manifests when a low, resonant hum began to fill the room. It was not a pleasant hum. It was the kind of hum that usually preceded a very large, very expensive machine making a very final, very expensive noise. The lights flickered once, twice, then shifted to a stark, blood-red emergency glow. An automated voice, calm and utterly unhelpful, echoed through the station. Warning! Resonance core instability detected. Sector Gamma 7 is experiencing cascading power failure. Automated containment protocols, failed. Automated transport systems, failed. Automated coffee machine in the break room, failed. A collective groan went through the room at that last one. Some things were sacred. Proctor Vex's composure finally cracked. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran down his lanky frame. Impossible. The station's systems are triple redundant. Phip, who had now escalated from a gentle oscillation to a full-body seizure of pure panic, pulled up a schematic on his datapad. His furry hands trembled. The primary resonance stabilizer in Gamma 7 has gone offline. It requires a manual reset. But the entire sector is without power or stable gravity. The core will breach containment in 27 minutes. A heavy silence fell over the lecture hall. 27 minutes? Gamma 7 was a kilometer away, through a labyrinth of service corridors and maintenance tunnels. A kilometer of darkness, intermittent life support, and unpredictable gravity fluctuations. Korg stood up, cracking his thick knuckles. I will go. Grolak warriors do not fear the dark. Vex immediately shot that down. Your plan is to what? Leap there? The distance is far too great for even your powerful musculature to cover in a single bound, and repeated bursts will exhaust you within 100 meters. Inefficiency, remember? Korg grunted, which was Grolak 4. I'd like to see you try, you walking twig. We must formulate a logical plan. Vex declared, trying to regain control. A committee must be formed. We will analyze the schematics, calculate the optimal energy expenditure route, and then delegate. We don't have time. A calm voice cut through the rising panic. Every head, an eye stalk, and sensory node turned to the back of the room. Alex Chin was standing up, stretching his arms over his head like he'd just woken up from a nap. He looked at the frantic schematic on Phip's datapad, then blinked. The stabilizer. Is the manual reset just a big crank you have to turn? Phip nodded, vibrating so hard he was starting to blur. Why, yes. A failsafe. It requires 500 newtons of rotational force. Alex nodded slowly. Okay. I can get there. Proctor Vex stared at him as if he'd just proposed solving the problem by means of interpretive dance. You? How? Your personal transporter is offline, same as everyone else's. Alex shrugged, a gesture of such profound casualness that it bordered on cosmic insolence. No, I mean, I'll run. The silence that followed was a brand new flavor of quiet. It was a dense, concentrated silence, thick with disbelief and a heavy dose of second-hand embarrassment. Korg the Grolak actually choked on a snort. Running? For a whole kilometer? Through a hazardous, unpowered sector? The primitive, inefficient human was proposing the most primitive, inefficient solution imaginable. Proctor Vex let out a series of dry, clicking sounds that the universal translator identified as laughter. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the sound of 1,000 tiny bones breaking in a jar. You will run? You propose to solve a temporal mechanics crisis with jogging? Well, yeah, Alex said unfazed. It's the most direct route. Schematics show a clear path through the service tunnels. It's just a straight shot, mostly. A straight shot of over 1,000 of your meters. Vex countered, his voice dripping with condescension. Through variable gravity and atmospheric voids. Your endurance, as we have just established, is a metabolic fallacy. You would be exhausted and incapacitated before you reach the first junction. Korg stepped forward, his massive form looming over Alex. The human is soft, but he has spirit. The Grolak rumbled, which was the nicest thing he'd ever said about another species. But the proctor is correct. This is a task for burst strength, for a powerful leap to clear obstacles. Not for plodding. Phip, who had managed to stop vibrating long enough to consult a regulation manual, squeaked. Regulation 4-173b clearly states that all crisis responses must be initiated by certified personnel using approved station equipment. Uncertified bipedal locomotion is not on the list. Alex just looked at the countdown timer projected on the main screen. 24 minutes. Okay, look. Your way is to form a committee and wait to die. Korg's way is to punch a wall and wait to die. The regulations way is to fill out a form and wait to die. My way involves moving my legs. I like my way. This simple, unassailable logic seemed to short-circuit Proctor Vex's brain. He was so used to winning arguments with complex theorems and multisyllabic jargon that a straightforward "your plan is dumb" left him momentarily speechless. But he recovered quickly, his intellectual pride wounded. This is an opportunity. Vex announced, a new, dangerous glint in his ocular implants. A real-world experiment. I will not allow you to go alone on this fool's errand. It would be an unobserved data point. I shall accompany you. For the first 100 meters only, of course. To personally document the rapid onset of your metabolic failure. Alex blinked. You want to come with me? To watch me get tired? Precisely. Vex chirped. It will be an invaluable lesson for everyone on the folly of relying on such primitive methods. Korg let out a low growl. The idea of the fragile human attempting a feat of endurance was one thing. The idea of that spindly, arrogant proctor tagging along to mock him was another. But the idea of them both going without him, the strongest being in the room, was an insult to his warrior pride. If the stick insect is going, then so am I. Korg declared, slamming a fist the size of a dinner plate into his other palm. I will show you both what true power is. I will reach the first junction before your human legs have completed a dozen paces. Fip wrung his tiny, furry paws. But the regulations. The supervision. A crisis response team must have a designated oversight officer. I suppose I have to come too. And just like that, a rescue mission was born. Not out of logic or bravery, but out of a bizarre cocktail of academic spite, warrior ego, and bureaucratic ass-covering. Alex looked at his newly formed team, a sarcastic praying mantis who wanted to watch him fail, a living battering ram with the stamina of a houseplant, and a panic attack given fuzzy form. The countdown clock hit 23 minutes. Great, Alex said, with a complete lack of enthusiasm. Team-building exercise. Let's go. He started doing some light quad stretches, a motion so alien and bizarre to the others that they could only stare in confused silence. The great human persistence hunt was about to begin, and its first observers were pretty sure they were about to witness a very slow, very inefficient disaster. The airlock to the Gamma 7 service corridor hissed open, revealing a yawning maw of darkness punctuated by the occasional flicker of a dying emergency light. The air tasted stale, metallic. The station's gentle hum was gone, replaced by an unnerving silence broken only by the distant groans of stressed metal. It was spooky. The kind of place you'd expect a monster to jump out, or worse, a health and safety inspector. The environmental sensors indicate fluctuating gravity fields and pockets of thin atmosphere. Vex announced, his voice tight. A perfectly hostile environment for your exertions. He was trying to sound smug, but there was a tremor of genuine unease in his clicks. Korg just grunted and pounded his chest. The Grolak fear no void. Fip was clutching his datapad like a holy relic. I've logged our departure time. I do hope I filled out Form 7J correctly. The liability clauses for intersector travel during a containment failure are extensive. Alex finished his stretches and took a deep breath. Okay, team. The plan is simple. We go straight. We don't stop. I'll set a steady pace. Just try to keep up. Vex let out another one of his dry, rattling laughs. Oh, I assure you, keeping up will not be the challenge. The challenge will be for us to not get too far ahead while waiting for your inevitable collapse. Korg cracked his neck. I will be at the first marker in 10 seconds. Right, Alex said, completely deadpan. It's not a race, but okay. He looked at the three of them. Ready? Before Fip could squeak a no or Vex could offer another condescending bon mot, Korg exploded into motion. It was less a run and more a controlled demolition. His massive legs, designed for leaping across canyons on his high-gravity homeworld, propelled him forward in a series of ground-shaking bounds. He covered 20 meters in the blink of an eye, a blur of speed and power, his heavy breathing echoing like a steam engine. Vex, not to be outdone, engaged his own unique form of locomotion. His 3 spindly legs moved in a tripod-like scuttle, a gait optimized for maximum energy conservation over smooth, level surfaces. It was surprisingly fast, if you ignored the fact that he looked like a runaway coat rack. He scurried past Alex, his ocular implants glowing with smug satisfaction. And Alex? Alex just started to jog. It was not an impressive sight. There was no explosion of power. No elegant display of speed. It was just a steady, rhythmic bounce. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. His breathing was even, his arms pumping in a relaxed, practiced motion. It was the most gloriously, beautifully inefficient thing the aliens had ever seen. For the first 30 meters, the aliens' predictions seemed to be coming true. Korg was already a good 50 meters ahead, a monstrous silhouette disappearing into the gloom. Vex was still scuttling along about 10 meters in front of Alex, occasionally glancing back to make sure the human could witness his superior, logical pace. Then, things started to change. Up ahead, the sound of Korg's steam engine breathing suddenly became ragged, turning into a series of desperate, wheezing gasps. The ground-shaking bounds became shorter, heavier. At the 60-meter mark, the Grolak warrior, the pinnacle of explosive power, stumbled to a halt. He leaned against the corridor wall, his massive chest heaving violently, his chitinous skin glistening with a sheen of foul-smelling sweat. His entire species was built for the 100-meter dash, not the 1,000-meter marathon. His metabolic engine had burned through its entire fuel reserve in one glorious, pointless burst. As Alex jogged past him, Korg could only lift a trembling claw and gasp. "So much lactic acid!" Alex gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "Pace yourself, big guy." Meanwhile, Proctor Vex was also discovering the harsh realities of applied biology. His energy-efficient scuttle was, it turned out, only efficient for about 25 seconds. His 3 hearts, normally beating in a calm, logical rhythm, were now hammering against his exoskeleton like trapped birds. His triple-jointed knees, perfect for standing motionless for hours while contemplating existential theorems, were not designed for repetitive motion. They began to emit a series of alarming clicks and pops. At the 30-second mark, precisely 70 meters from the starting point, Proctor Vex's legs gave out. He didn't so much fall as fold. His limbs tangled in a heap of sharp angles and intellectual regret, and he collapsed onto the deck plating with a clatter of brittle exoskeleton. He lay there, gasping, his tri-lenses spinning wildly. Alex jogged up and stopped, not even breathing heavily yet. He looked down at the heap of xylogen. "You okay there, Proctor?" "Metabolic cascade," Vex wheezed, one spindly claw twitching. "Oxygen debt, exceeding theoretical limits." My analysis was flawed. Phip, who had been waddling along at a panicked shuffle, finally caught up, his own tiny lungs burning. He saw Korg hyperventilating against a wall and Vex folded up like a broken deck chair. Then he looked at Alex, who was just standing there, his heart rate probably barely elevated. The human wasn't even sweating yet. "But how?" Phip squeaked, looking between the collapsed paragons of alien superiority and the perfectly fine human. The inefficiency, the wasteful energy expenditure. It's not logical." Alex took a swig from the water bottle clipped to his belt. "It's called cardio," he said, as if explaining a concept as simple as gravity. "You don't go all out at the start. You find a rhythm and you stick to it. Your body adapts." He offered a hand to Vex. The Xylosian stared at it for a moment, his entire worldview crumbling. Here was the living embodiment of a biological party trick. A creature running on a flawed chassis powered by a monumental waste of metabolic resources. Offering to help him, the genius academic who had just finished mocking his entire species. With a reluctant, shame-filled click, Vex took his hand and allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. His legs wobbled. This sensation, Vex stammered. This burning in my muscle analogs, it is unpleasant. Yeah, that's the good stuff, Alex said with a grin. Means you're working. The countdown clock on Phip's datapad showed 19 minutes remaining. They had covered less than a tenth of the distance, and 2/3 of the rescue team were already physically and existentially broken. Alex looked down the dark corridor. All right, he said, his voice echoing in the silence. Lesson over. Now we've got a station to save. Try to keep up. And this time, maybe try breathing. He turned and started jogging again. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. A steady, relentless, and suddenly terrifyingly efficient pace. Vex and a still wheezing Korg could only watch him go, their respective certainties about the universe lying in a heap on the floor right next to them. The journey transformed into a surreal, mobile classroom on Terran physiology, with Alex as the reluctant professor and the aliens as his very, very winded students. The first lesson was on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Alex called back over his shoulder, his voice steady despite the continuous motion. Try to sync it with your steps. In for 2 steps, out for 2 steps. Proctor Vex, attempting to scuttle walk at a pace that wouldn't cause his knees to disintegrate, tried to process this. Sync respiration with locomotion? A conscious, deliberate act? Our respiratory systems are autonomic, governed by blood oxygen levels. To manually override them is crude. Crude works, Alex replied. Just try it. Vex made a series of hesitant, clicking gasps, attempting to match the rhythm. His movements became slightly less jerky. The frantic fluttering in his chest subsided to a mere panic tremor. Intriguing, he wheezed. A forced state of metabolic equilibrium. Inefficient yet functional. Behind him, Korg was having an even harder time. The Grolak respiratory system was a set of massive bellows designed for one purpose: to suck in huge amounts of oxygen for a single, cataclysmic burst of energy. The concept of steady, rhythmic breathing was as foreign to him as poetry. He kept trying to take one enormous, all-encompassing breath that would last him for the next 50 meters. The result was that he kept getting lightheaded and stumbling. Like this? Korg grunted, inhaling so sharply he sounded like a vacuum cleaner trying to swallow a sock, then holding it until his face turned a pale shade of purple. No, not like that, Alex sighed, slowing his jog to a walk for a moment to let them catch up. Little sips, Korg. Little sips of air, all the time. You're not a jet engine, you're a campfire. You need a steady draft, not a single explosion. This analogy seemed to click something in the Grolak's mind. Campfire. Slow burn. He began to take smaller, more frequent breaths. His gait, a lumbering, exhausted stomp, smoothed out slightly. He still looked miserable, but he was at least a functional kind of miserable now. Phip, meanwhile, was documenting everything on his datapad with a frantic intensity. Subject H. Sapiens demonstrates non-autonomic respiratory control to maximize oxygenation during sustained exertion. Note, potential application for emergency protocols. Query, does this jogging require special footwear? They reached the first major obstacle a few hundred meters later. The corridor opened into a wide cargo bay where the gravity plating was failing spectacularly. The gravity would be normal for 5 seconds, then switch off completely for 10, then flicker back on with a lurch. Debris, crates, tools, a very confused-looking cleaning drone, was drifting lazily in the zero-G periods and slamming to the floor during the high-G ones. Impossible! Vex declared, steadying himself on the wall. To cross this, one would need precise timing and a huge-ass jump, Korg finished, a glimmer of his old pride returning. His eyes gleamed. This was his territory. The gravity is off for 10 seconds. The bay is 60 meters across. I can clear that in a single bound. Korg, wait. Alex started, But the Grolak was already coiling his powerful legs, his warrior instincts taking over. "Witness the power of the Grolak!" he roared. He waited for the gravity to die, for the nearby crates to start floating, and then he launched himself into the air. It was a magnificent sight. For about 2 seconds, he soared through the zero-G bay like a missile made of muscle and chitin. But his timing was off by a fraction. He had launched at the very beginning of the 10-second window. Just as he was about to reach the far side, the gravity flickered back on. Violently. Korg, who had been a graceful projectile, instantly became a very ungraceful anvil. He dropped out of the air with a surprised "oof!" and slammed onto the deck plating with a deafening clang of armor. He was lucky he landed on his feet, but the impact sent a shockwave up his legs that made his teeth rattle. He stumbled and fell to one knee, groaning. Alex shook his head and jogged up to the edge of the bay. He didn't try to jump. He didn't try to do anything heroic. He just waited. He watched the cycle once, then twice. "Okay," he said to Vex and Fip. "Here's the plan. We wait for the gravity to go out. We push off the wall, nice and easy. We use the handrails along the side to guide ourselves across. We don't rush. You intend to float?" Fip squeaked. "Pretty much," Alex said. The gravity died again. With a gentle push, Alex launched himself into the darkness, his hand easily finding the emergency guide rail that ran along the wall. He moved with the quiet competence of someone who had spent a lot of time in zero-G training. He pulled himself along, hand over hand, a slow but steady progress. Vex and Fip watched, mesmerized, then hesitantly followed his lead. The Xylosian was surprisingly nimble in zero-G, his long limbs perfect for reaching the next handhold. Fip just curled into a terrified ball and pushed off in the general direction of the other side, whimpering the entire way. They reached the other side just as the gravity was about to cycle back on. They were standing on the deck next to a groaning Korg as the floating debris once again crashed down around them. Korg looked up at Alex, his pride thoroughly shattered. Your campfire defeated my explosion. It's not a competition, man," Alex said, helping him up. "It's just different tools for different jobs. Your jump was awesome. Your timing was just a little off." The Grolak warrior looked at the human, at his complete lack of gloating, his simple, practical competence. For the first time, the look of pity in Korg's eyes was replaced by something else. A grudging, burgeoning respect. The countdown clock showed 12 minutes. They were more than halfway there, a battered, wheezing, but determined team, slowly learning that the most inefficient-looking solution was sometimes the only one that worked. The next section of the corridor was even worse. A rupture in a coolant line had vented cryogenic gas into the passage, lowering the temperature and, more importantly, displacing a significant portion of the breathable air. The atmosphere was thin, cold, and hazy. Emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows that danced like ghosts in the swirling fog. "Warning! Low oxygen environment," Fip's datapad chirped weakly. "Standard respiratory filters may not be sufficient. Proceed with extreme caution." Proctor Vex, whose species respired through a series of delicate spiracles along his torso, was the first to feel the effects. He began to weave on his feet, his movements becoming sluggish. My cellular respiration is compromised," he clicked, his voice thin and reedy. "The partial pressure of oxygen is below minimum viable thresholds." Korg wasn't doing much better. His massive lungs, designed for gulping huge quantities of air, were now a liability. He was pulling in thin, useless gas, and his powerful muscles were screaming for oxygen that wasn't there. He leaned against the wall, his breathing a painful, rasping sound. "This is not honorable air," he gasped. Alex felt it too, a tightness in his chest, a slight dizziness at the edge of his vision. But his body, a product of 1 billion years of evolution on a planet with a widely variable atmosphere, immediately began to compensate. His heart rate increased slightly, his body automatically prioritizing blood flow to his brain and vital organs. He took slower, deeper breaths, consciously trying to pull every last molecule of oxygen from the thin air. He looked at his struggling companions. They were fading, and fading fast. Their high-performance, specialized biologies were failing them in this compromised environment. But Alex's biology wasn't specialized. It was a messy, adaptable, jack-of-all-trades system built to survive. "Okay, new plan," he said, his own voice a little strained. "We can't stop. If we stop, we're done. We have to keep moving, but we have to be smart about it." He unclipped his water bottle from his belt and took a small sip. "Vex, your body is shutting down because it thinks it's an emergency. You need to trick it. Control your panic. Slow your heart rate. Think logical thoughts. Logic is difficult without oxygen." Vex rasped, but he closed his ocular implants and seemed to focus inward. His trembling lessened slightly. "Korg," Alex said, turning to the Grolak. "You're trying to pull in a lumful of air that isn't there. Stop. Take short, shallow breaths. Like this," Alex demonstrated, a technique climbers at high altitudes used. "It's called pressure breathing. Purse your lips, breathe out hard. It keeps the air in your lungs a little longer, gives them more time to absorb what's there." Korg watched, his brow furrowed in concentration. He mimicked the action. A short, sharp inhale, then a forced, powerful exhale through his mandibles. It was awkward, unnatural, but after a few tries, the rasping in his chest eased. A flicker of comprehension crossed his face. He was manually optimizing his own failing system, guided by the creature he'd dismissed as soft and primitive. "We link up," Alex commanded. "Fip, you're the lightest. Get on Korg's back. Korg, you put a hand on my shoulder. Vex, you hold on to Korg. We move as a single unit. Nobody gets left behind." There were no arguments. The arrogance and pride had been scoured away by hypoxia and desperation. Korg knelt, and the terrified Fip scrambled onto his broad back, clinging on for dear life. Vex placed a trembling claw on Korg's shoulder pauldron. Korg, in turn, rested his heavy hand on Alex's shoulder. The human grunted at the weight but nodded. "Okay," Alex breathed, the cold air stinging his lungs. "Slow and steady. Let's go." And they moved. A strange, symbiotic creature shuffling through the icy fog. Alex at the front, the human engine setting a slow, deliberate, survivalist pace. Korg in the middle, the Grolak muscle, his immense strength now used only to support his companions. Vex, the Xylosian brain, his analytical mind now focused solely on controlling his own biology. And Fip, the bureaucrat, his role reduced to being terrified ballast. They passed the bodies of automated maintenance drones that had frozen solid when their power cells failed in the cold. They navigated around buckled floor plates and dangling power conduits. Every step was an effort. Every breath was a victory. The only sounds were their own ragged breathing and the steady, reassuring rhythm of Alex's feet on the deck. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. It was in that freezing, oxygen-starved corridor that the last vestiges of the aliens' superiority complex finally died. They weren't a Grolak warrior, a Xylosian intellectual, and a Lepi administrator following a human. They were a team. A weird, dysfunctional, gasping for air team, but a team nonetheless. And they were being kept alive by the one thing they had all mocked: persistence. The simple, stubborn, biological refusal to just give up and lie down. The countdown clock on Fip's datapad, which he was now too exhausted to even look at, ticked past 7 minutes. They didn't know it, but they were getting close. Their bizarre, inefficient, and utterly heroic jog was almost at its destination. The mountain was, against all logic, starting to erode. Finally, they stumbled through a pressure door at the end of the corridor and collapsed into a large, circular chamber. The air here was breathable, the temperature normal. At the center of the room stood a massive piece of machinery, humming with a dangerous, unstable energy. A single red light pulsed on its control panel, bathing the chamber in an ominous glow. This was it. The resonance stabilizer. Fip's datapad let out a shrill beep. 6 minutes until core containment breach. Alex let go of his companions and staggered towards the console, his legs feeling like lead. He'd been supporting or guiding the others for the better part of a kilometer, and the strain was finally catching up to him. He was breathing heavily now, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. He was just a human, after all. A tired human. He looked at the control panel. It was, thankfully, exactly as Fip had described. A single, large, intimidatingly thick crank handle was set into the console, currently locked in the offline position. An arrow helpfully pointed to the online position, a quarter turn away. Below it, a stenciled warning read, "Manual override. Requires 500 newtons rotational force." Alex grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled. It didn't budge. It felt like it was welded in place. He gritted his teeth, put his back into it, and strained with everything he had. The handle moved, maybe a millimeter, accompanied by a horrible grinding sound from within the machine. But that was it. His endurance had gotten them here, but this final task, this was a job for a different kind of strength. He slumped against the console, defeated. I can't turn it," he panted. "It's too heavy." For a moment, a terrible despair settled over the chamber. They had come all this way, overcome every obstacle, only to fail at the very last step. Fip started to vibrate again, a low, mournful hum of impending doom. Vex leaned against the wall, his analytical mind calculating the precise milliseconds of their imminent vaporization. Then, a heavy hand clamped down on Alex's shoulder. He looked up to see Korg standing over him. The Grolak was still breathing hard, his armor was dented and scraped, and he looked utterly exhausted. But for the first time, there was a clear, focused fire in his eyes. He wasn't just a proud warrior anymore. He was a member of a team. "You got us here, human," Korg rumbled, his voice low but steady. "My turn." He gently pushed Alex aside. He looked at the crank handle, then at his own massive, clawed hands. This was what he was built for. Not the long run, not the clever navigation, but this. A single, decisive act of overwhelming power. The pounce. The final, explosive burst. Korg wrapped his hands around the handle. He planted his feet wide, his powerful leg muscles coiling like immense springs. He took one deep, shuddering breath, a proper Grolak breath this time, full of purpose. "For Epsilon Station!" he roared, though the only ones to hear were his 3 companions. And then he pulled. There was no grinding, no straining. There was only the sudden, sharp shriek of protesting metal as 500 newtons of force were not so much applied as inflicted upon the mechanism. Korg's muscles bulged, the tendons in his arms standing out like steel cables. With a single, titanic heave, he wrenched the crank handle through its quarter turn. It slammed into the online position with a deafening clang that echoed through the chamber. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the dangerous, unstable hum of the stabilizer began to smooth out. The pulsing red light on the console turned a steady, reassuring green. A series of relays clicked on throughout the room, and the main lights flickered to life, flooding the chamber with clean, white light. A calm, automated voice chimed from the console. "Resonance stabilizer online. Core stability returning to nominal levels. All systems functioning." They had done it. Alex just stared, a slow grin spreading across his face. Korg stood back from the console, panting but triumphant, flexing his hands. Vex let out a long, shuddering series of clicks that might have been a sigh of relief. Fip had fainted. He'd simply overloaded on panic and passed out, his datapad clattering to the floor. The screen showed the final countdown timer, frozen at 3 minutes and 14 seconds. Korg looked at Alex and gave him a slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't a nod of gratitude. It was a nod of mutual respect. The warrior's nod. "The campfire and the explosion," Korg said, a hint of awe in his voice. "They are both necessary." Alex nodded back, too tired to say much more than, "Yeah. I guess they are." He slid down the console to sit on the floor, his legs finally giving out. He just wanted a nap. And maybe a protein bar. A very, very large protein bar. The persistence hunt was over. They had chased their prey, a catastrophic containment breach, and against all odds, they had run it to ground. The ride back to the central command hub was, blessedly, uneventful. The now functional automated transport system whisked them silently through the corridors they had just spent the better part of half an hour struggling through. The contrast was not lost on any of them. The smooth, effortless glide of the transport pod felt like a luxury beyond measure. No one spoke. Phip had been revived and was now silently filling out incident reports on his datapad with the grim focus of a man who has seen the bureaucratic abyss and lived to tell the tale. Korg sat with his massive arms crossed, staring at his own reflection in the pod's window, a contemplative look on his rugged face. Alex was leaning his head against the cool glass, his eyes half closed, replaying the morning's 5K run in his head and wondering if he could count this little adventure as his workout for the day. But it was Proctor Vex who was the most changed. He stood perfectly still in the center of the pod, his usual air of condescending superiority completely gone. He was looking at Alex, but not in the way one looks at a lab specimen. He was looking at him with the stunned, bewildered expression of a mathematician who has just discovered that 2 + 2 sometimes equals a fish. His entire, logically ordered universe had been turned upside down by a sweaty, jogging primate. When they arrived back at the lecture hall, a team of medics and engineers rushed to greet them, babbling about their heroism. Phip immediately handed over his stack of freshly completed digital forms and began debriefing a superior officer in a series of high-pitched, frantic squeaks. Korg was swarmed by a few other Grolax security officers, who clapped him on the back and bellowed questions about what glorious battle he had fought. Korg just shook his head and said, "It was not a battle. It was a lesson." Alex slipped away from the commotion, his only goal in life now to find the nearest water dispenser. He was chugging his third cup of recycled station water when Proctor Vex approached him, moving with a quiet, hesitant grace. "Chen," Vex said, his voice softer than Alex had ever heard it. The usual dry clicks were replaced by a more subdued tone. "Proctor," Alex replied, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Feeling better? Knees okay?" Vex made a gesture of dismissal. "My physical discomfort is irrelevant. I have been reassessing my data." He paused, which for a Xylosian was the equivalent of a human having a full-blown emotional breakdown. "My analysis of human physiology was incomplete. I focused on peak output, on the efficiency of the single action. I failed to account for the strategic application of continuous, low-grade inefficiency." "You mean jogging?" Alex said. "Yes," Vex admitted, the words sounding like a bitter pill in his mouth. "That. I modeled your species as a poorly designed sprinter. It never occurred to me that you were, in fact, a perfectly designed marathon runner. Your biology isn't a compromise. It is a specialization, just of a different kind. The ability to just keep going, it is a tactical variable I had never considered." Alex shrugged. "We're good at not dying. It's kind of our whole thing." Vex stood in silence for another long moment. Then, he turned to the main console in the lecture hall, the one he had used for his presentation. With a few swift, precise taps of his claws, he brought up his slide deck. He navigated to slide 47, the one with the picture of the human, and the title. "A biological compromise." He stared at it, then with a decisive click, he deleted it. Then he deleted slide 48 about Tablonian digestion, and 49 about Grolac metabolic burnout. He wiped the entire presentation. He opened a new file. The title he typed was simple: "A re-evaluation of Terran endurance strategies and their application in sustained crisis mitigation." He turned back to Alex. "I owe you an apology, Specialist Chen. And my gratitude. You have provided me with a profound learning experience." Before Alex could respond, Korg appeared at his side, holding out a Grolac energy bar. It looked like a brick of compressed granite and probably smelled worse, but the gesture was clear. "You have the spirit of a Grolac warrior," Korg rumbled, a statement of such high praise that the other Grolax in the room gasped. You just store it in smaller pieces. Alex took the bar. Thanks, Korg. You too. That was some serious crank turning back there. A rare, toothy grin spread across Korg's face. From across the room, Phip's squeaky voice could be heard debriefing his superior. And so, the human-initiated protocol, JOG. It was highly unorthodox and violated at least 17 subsections of the emergency response mandate, but the preliminary data suggests a 100% success rate. I'm recommending we form a subcommittee to explore the feasibility of establishing a station-wide cardio program. Alex just smiled, took a bite of the granite-like energy bar, and nearly broke a tooth. It was all just another weird day at the office. He had started his morning being told his entire species was an embarrassing evolutionary joke, and ended it by becoming the poster child for a new form of crisis management. All because humans, in their infinite, glorious inefficiency, had figured out the single most powerful survival tool in the universe, the simple, stubborn act of putting one foot in front of the other, and just not stopping.